In this video, I will be sharing my bike fitting story from 2009 to now. The trials and tribulations, including 4 professional bike fits, before finally a 5th time lucky in May 2020, where I got to see Neill Stanbury for the first time. Now, before I share the story, I want to be 100% clear with you up front that my story has actually led me to creating an online bike fitting program with Neill Stanbury, which I will be sharing with you at the end of this video. But before we get to the end of the video, I'm hopeful that through my story, you might learn a thing or two. Maybe you can resonate, or at least there are some tidbits there for you to take away. So it was 2009 where I purchased my first road bike, which is what you can see me on here. It was a $2,500 Scott. I don't think they make them anymore, whatever it was. And I believe at the time, the bike shop where I purchased the bike, they did a 15 to 20 minute fit. I can't remember much about it, and I think in those initial stages of riding, maybe the first 3 to 4 months, it was also new to me. I had no idea any of the sensations I was experiencing, let alone if I had a poor bike fit. But I reckon it was probably around the 6 to 8 months into my road cycling journey where I started to ride a little bit more. I was getting into the bunch rides. I was riding harder, doing more volume, and it was there where I started to experience some knee pain. And by this time, 6 to 8 months deep, I'd already purchased my second bike, as you can see here, being a Specialized Tarmac. And I went into a famous bike shop in Melbourne called Total Rush. And I went into the guys there and I said, hey, I'm starting to experiencing some knee pain. What do you recommend? Anything, a bike fitter or something like that? They actually suggested, or one of the sales guys suggested, and maybe he was just trying to flog me something, speed play pedals. I was on Shimano. I was on the yellow cleat, I think, which is 6 degrees of float, which is the most float you can get. But on the speed plays, you can get more float. Your foot can really wiggle around, and that should alleviate the knee pain that is coming further up the chain. So I said, okay, if Fabian Cancellara, who was riding pretty well at the time, is on them and it can alleviate my knee pain, I'll give them a go. So I did, and they were right. It actually got rid of my knee pain, albeit a Band-Aid solution. At the time, I was also starting to experience, through riding more, a numb right hand when I was riding like 2 to 3 hours. Like the longer I rode, the worse it got. And of course, I could never find the right bike seat. I always had a sore ass at the time. But the more and more I was getting into riding, the more and more I was speaking to people, and the more and more I was starting to hear and appreciate the benefits of a proper bike fit. You know, spending $250, $300 Australian dollars at the time to go and get a proper bike fit, you're gonna get more power. So it was at the end of 2011, roughly 2 years into my journey, where I finally bit the bullet and had a professional bike fit. And over the course of 9 years, 2011 to 2020, I had 4 professional bike fits. And I wanted to bundle them all together because they all had a very similar outcome. But some context for you first. So it was about 2013-14 where I was really starting to get into road cycling even more. I was racing with a team and doing 10 to 12 hours per week, I'd say, for a couple of years. During those years, I was still experiencing a bit of discomfort in the rear. I was still getting a numb right hand, but something more prevalent started to expose its ugly head. I was starting to get really bad right-sided hip pain. So much so that I used to get back from every hard ride on a Tuesday ride and on a Saturday ride, and I would actually be using, just give me a sec, I've got to go to the fridge. I was using a bag of peas on my right hip to try and get rid of the inflammation. And it kind of worked, kind of didn't. And I probably should have really been trying to get to the root cause of the issue. But when you're in your mid-30s, you don't tend to think about these things too much. So I just kept soldiering on. So when I think about these niggles that I continued to have, my right-sided hip pain, and all the other things that were going on at the time, I guess I look at those 4 professional bike fits and the motivation to do them is, 1, changing bikes over the years. Number 2, you hear about some new awesome bike fitter through some friends, so you just go and see them. And number 3, deep down you hope that your right-sided hip pain and those other niggles would just go away. But the issues kind of always stayed there after these fits, and I kind of just concluded after many, many different fits and many, many years of trying that this is just my road cycling. This is the way it's going to have to be. Thankfully, By chance, I found a good saddle with a new bike purchase in 2015 that seemed to finally work, being the Specialized Toupe or Toupe. That was a plus. My arse issues were mostly gone, but the other things I just accepted. Fast forward to January 2020. I'm riding my bike at the Tour Down Under with a mate of mine by the name of Tommy Nankervis, who has recently become a bike fitter himself, and he says, "I think your saddle is too high." I pondered at the time and I'm like, well, I am getting really bad left-sided saddle sores, which is a side effect of a saddle that's too high. Maybe Tommy's right. So I dropped the saddle 10 mil as you suggested. I'd actually dropped it maybe 3 to 5 mil a few days prior because I felt there was something wrong. But as Neill has told me since, that if your saddle is so far out of the range, if you move it a little bit, it'll feel just as rubbish. And that is exactly what was happening to me. So Tommy was right about that. He also suggested or recommended to me at the time that a new bike fitter, well, not a new bike fitter, but a good bike fitter from Melbourne had just moved to Queensland, making him a new bike fitter in Queensland. And I just moved to Queensland. You should go and see him. Now, you might be asking, why was my saddle way too high when I'd had 4 professional bike fits? Well, I think when you've had so many bike fits and you kind of give up on them, you kind of just set yourself up yourself. And I reckon for a couple of years I was running a saddle that was way too high. Now I reflect. So that was the reason there. In terms of Tommy's recommendation to go see Neill, to be honest, I had given up on a bike fit that was going to resolve or fix my problems. However, being relatively new into the new YouTube world at the time, I thought to myself, well, people love bike fitting content. I'm doing YouTube. I haven't done much bike fitting content. I wonder if Neill would be happy for me to film him. So when I got back from the TDU, I emailed Neill, introduced myself, and I said, hey, I've got a YouTube channel. Here's a link. Would you be willing for me to film the fit and I can make some content out of it? And he said, absolutely, no worries. In fact, I'm trying to get my Queensland bike fitting business off the ground. I'll do the fit for free in return for the exposure. Awesome. Little did I know that this bike fit would change the course of my cycling, my business, and my friendship circle forever. But let's focus on the cycling side here. For the first time in my life, I found out I had a slightly shorter right leg. I also found out that I had poor hip mobility and was in the hip impingement bucket, meaning I find it hard to rotate my hips and get nice and aero in the road position. For me, these are pretty critical things. I am 10 years deep into professional bike fits. I've had 4 of them, and no one has ever said that to me. The solution, Neill puts shims between my shoe and cleat to even out my leg length and ultimately adjust my symmetry on the bike to stop me compensating and rocking with a left leg that splayed out. I actually ended up with a 6mm shim under my shoe after starting with an 8mm shim. The reason why is because when you have a shorter leg, it could be either skeletal or it could be muscular, or in my case, it could be both. And when you even out your symmetry on the bike, your muscles will readapt, particularly seeing you lose hamstring engagement when you are compensating, meaning you may need to reduce the shim height after some time, which is what happened to me. Now, this shim addition, which I'd never had before or recommended to me before, was a massive game changer. I literally have never had right-sided hip pain ever again. And I'm sorry, Coles, I've reduced your bag of pea sales probably because I was buying 2 a week because you destroy them constantly putting them on your hip. Amazing. Additionally, my right numb hand after 2 to 3 hours of riding, gone. All from making me more symmetrical on the bike. Now, the other thing that Neill recommended in the fit, which I didn't get onto straight away, was because of my hip mobility, he suggested shorter cranks, 165mm cranks. Now, that's an investment. I'd just been to see Neill. I was skeptical from years of bike fit, so I didn't jump on it straight away. But after I reflected about the shim experience and how I was feeling on the bike and no more right-sided hip pain, no more numb hands, I'm like, this guy knows what he's talking about. So about 2 to 3 months after that fit, I bit the bullet and made the investment into 165mm cranks, changing over. And guess what? Surprise, surprise. Neill was right. I was able to get lower, easier. I was feeling more stable through the pedal stroke and I gained durability, I feel, through a more fluid pedal stroke. The cherry on top, as many of you would know, was the Eagle Beak saddle. A hideous saddle I was extremely reluctant to put on, but this enabled further and better hip rotation while also stabilizing me on the saddle. You see, I've always had this tendency to creep forward on the saddle and go back and reposition myself, especially under load. And unfortunately, the Eagle did help me out quite a lot, so I've ended up with a Gonzo on all my good bikes, which is bittersweet, I would say. So from there, as many of you would know, over the years, I have continued to do work with Neill, because not only is he a phenomenal bike fitter, but he's very good on camera, knows how to talk, to a point where I think it was February 2021, we both decided to stop doing content on my channel, and we created a new channel called the Road Cycling Academy channel, which Neill and I are 50-50 on. We started to make a lot more content, and Neill started to develop his reputation as somebody who knows what he's talking about, very articulate, and can also back it up with his fits. I mean, he literally has people flying from the other side of the world now to see him because other people can't resolve their issues, and Neill resolves the issue. That's amazing. It's no wonder he is booked out 3 to 4 months in advance. I completely get it. On our side of the fence at the RCA, a lot of people are contacting us saying, hey, really keen to get access to Neill. I'm trying to figure out this, or I can't set that up properly. Do you offer anything? So after years and years of receiving contact from people and me pestering Neill, we've got to put something together. This is where the online program comes into play. And hopefully now you understand the context, my story, why I'm so excited to bring Neill to you. Neill has finally downloaded his knowledge into an online manner where people can fit themselves from the comfort of their own home using Neill's methodologies. As somebody who's been a sports physiotherapist / bike fitter for the past 10 to 15 years. This program, we've labeled Bike Fit Fundamentals, has 7 step-by-step video tutorials from saddle height to shoe selection to cleat position, 8 downloadable guides, and access to an online forum where Neill is actually present in there responding to people, which is pretty darn amazing. And one of the things I really appreciate Neill for, he's not just a masterclass in human biomechanics, but he genuinely cares. He wants to do a good job. He's very meticulous, and that goes a long, long way. Just so you know, this program, Bike Fit Fundamentals, is live on the RCA website. You can purchase it. It's $147 USD. However, if you're watching this video in the first 24 to 48 hours of when it goes live, we've been running a launching special this week to get as many people in there as possible. It's only $99 USD for all those things, and basically all of Neill's wisdom poured into one online program. I hope you got value from this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a like, and I'll catch you in the next video.